Let's be clear on something, gentlemen.
Yep.
The reason that we have this massive two-part divide in a country of 330 million people is because the Republicans and Democrats are essentially one party. They work together every single day to screw over the American people just a little bit more than they did the day before.
Right.
And the only way that they can distract us from the obvious fact that they are working together in front of us every single day to make our lives harder and harder and to take control of us divide us, keep us at each other's throats, it's divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
It is divide and conquer. Because here's the thing. They don't tell you you're either voting Democrat or Republican. They tell you you're either voting Democrat or you're voting for Nazis. Or they tell you you're either voting Republican or you're voting for communists. But the reality is they're both doing the same thing. Their rhetoric to their bases is different, but in terms of what they actually do, it's the same thing. You're going to get the exact same outcomes no matter which Republican gets elected. And the only way they can distract us from that is to keep us literally fighting each other in the streets. Because the second we stop doing that, and the second we realize that it's not about left versus right or conservative versus progressive or even Democrat voter versus Republican voter or about, this color versus that color, it is about the American people versus a small handful of incredibly powerful and cynical sociopaths. Once we realize that, we're able to take a step back and go, oh, they're all in on it. We should be working together. We shouldn't be fighting each other.
Absolutely.
And that is the message.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Cole. This is We the Parents Podcast, episode 8, and I'm joined by Spike Cohen. How are you, Spike? We got to unmute you.
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you doing?
Man, we need producers for this stuff.
Really.
All right. So how you been, man?
I've been good. I thought after election day passed that everyone would be kind of sick of me and I'd go home and just, nap a lot. And it turns out I'm actually doing almost as much now as I was during the campaign. Instead of being in a different state every single day, I'm in a different state every weekend. So the pace is a little bit slower, but I've also gotten more national media attention since January than Joe and I got during the entire campaign combined. This is the time when major media isn't scared to, provide libertarian points of view because this is the off season and they're not worried about us stealing votes from their precious candidates. So I'm doing good. I've been doing good, doing busy, and just plowing ahead.
Tell us about you've been spending a lot of time with Kennedy on Fox. You just got off there to join me.
Yes, this is what happens when you are interviewing me right after I'm on national television, is I look much more respectable and presentable than I usually do. No, I've been on Kennedy. I've done some stuff on RT, on Russia Today. Done some stuff in USA Today, a few different things on national media. And I would say more importantly, I've been going to libertarian conventions and events across the country so far this year. I've been in California, Nashville, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, Huntsville, Alabama, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Wasilla, Alaska. I'm going to be going across the country to talk about building a culture of winning in this party and winning more races at the local and regional level where we're able to win right now, and building a blueprint to actually accomplish the stuff that we've been fantasizing about as a party for 50 years now: ending the Fed, ending the wars, ending taxation, freeing people from cages. All that stuff can happen and not just be something we kind of fantasize about and lament that it's never going to happen. We can build a blueprint to actually get that accomplished. And that's what I'm working on right now.
That's beautiful, man. What do you want to tell my audience, especially because I probably have a mixed bag? What do you want to tell them about libertarianism?
Libertarianism, in a nutshell, is that we believe that you do best when you are most free. Conversely, we believe that when you look at the problems that we're facing right now, whether you're talking about the problems with this pandemic or the lockdowns, whether you're talking about issues with the cost of healthcare, whether you're talking about issues with education, where in the past few decades we've gone from being number 1 to number, I think it's 28 or some nonsense like that. When you look at everything that's happening across the board, if you go to the core reason for why it's happening because Republicans and Democrats have worked together to rob you and your neighbors and your communities of all of their power and their freedom and their decision-making ability, and of course of their money as well. And they've centralized all of that into themselves and have made it so that they're the only ones who they're the ones who create the solutions to our problems. But really all they're doing is taking all that from us so they can hand it off to the cronies who put them in office. It's a giant shell game, and it's built around the presumption that they know better than you, even though we all know that's all a bunch of garbage. These people can barely tie their own shoes, and yet we are putting them in charge of everything, of every aspect of our lives, or rather, they're putting themselves in charge of it. And as with any other con game, the con game ends as soon as we refuse to be conned by them. And so libertarians believe that once we stop the con, once we don't allow them to con us into thinking that they're fighting each other when the reality is they're fighting us together, once we kick them out of office and replace them with libertarians who actually recognize that we do best when we're most free, and take all that power and that freedom and that money that's been stolen from you and put it back in your hands where it always belonged, then we can begin to solve the problems that we are facing. And frankly, many of the problems that we're facing will go away as a result of them not imposing them on us anymore. That's libertarianism in a nutshell. We could spend, as you know, hours talking about libertarian theory and principles like self-ownership and non-aggression and property rights and so forth. But that's, if you distill it down to its core message for voters, that's what it is that we're being conned. We know we're being conned. The only way we're going to end the con is to kick these people out of office, give you your freedom and your money back so that we can be able to live lives that and create solutions to the problems that we're facing together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tell us what you think is going on with, I'm just getting more into politics, and the reason that I'm getting into politics more is because of family law and my issue with, as you met my two sons in North Carolina, and we got to take photos and all that. And I got to have an interview with you briefly, and I'm going to show that when we segue into it. But what is it? What do you think is happening with Americans, both on the liberal, conservative? Obviously, I feel as a libertarian, I'm now registered as a libertarian. I feel like, we have a two-party system. The conservatives try to pretend to be liberty-minded libertarians.
Yeah.
And then you have a more socialist, quote unquote, / communist, bundle in a liberal sense, where they have this package of equality that really looks like stealing from everyone and giving everybody back crumbs. And so when they talk about equality, they mean equally poor. And equally destroyed. And it's, what are people not grasping? What is it? What's happening? In your opinion, with people's minds, especially right now? Are people easily manipulated?
I think that people are their plates are so filled just trying to get through life that it is exceedingly difficult for them to look above. And this is by design. They want people to be so busy just trying to make ends meet and just trying to get through life that they don't have time to take that step back and say, wait a second, this is all garbage. This is all a con that's happening. And that's why, it's great to have those truth tellers that to have those, emperor has no clothes moments where, someone stands up and says, this is all a sham. And if you look closely, you'll realize it. I don't know if it's easily manipulated. I think we're conditioned from a very early age to recognize presumed authority as a good thing. When we're little kids, we're told if a stranger comes to you, then you should go find a police officer. Well, a police officer is a stranger too, but we're told that, but we're given that. And then when we're in school, we have these much bigger people than us, adults, because we're still kids, telling us what to do because they told us to do it. And that's enough reason for us to have to do it. And that sticks with us long after we've grown to the same size or even larger than the people who told us to do these things, which is why often when we think of authority, if in your mind's eye you think of government, you think of this person on a pedestal or a hill telling you what to do. And the reality is that guy's probably shorter than you are, or roughly the same height as you are. And yet you're still thinking of this big, massive person telling you what to do. This is something that's enshrined very early on. Looking at Republicans and Democrats both have things where they try to sound libertarian. on
Mhm.
certain issues. So on the Republican side, it tends to be more economic freedoms, like, the ability to start a business or not have to pay as much taxes, or, maybe being more open
Capitalism.
on trade. Yeah, capitalism, or what they would call capitalism. And then
Mhm.
on the Democrat side, it's more the social freedoms. And there's some overlap here as well, but that's typically where they go. But then they use really flimsy pretexts to explain why you can't have any of that. And you actually need to be told what you can do in every aspect of your lives. Republicans tend to use things like protection and safety and strength overseas, and patriotism, and America first. And they use those types of overtures to explain why you
Right.
have to, every aspect of your life has to be controlled. And then Democrats tend to use things like equality, fairness,
Right.
equity,
Mhm.
and they also use safety as well. Safety is kind of an overriding term. And then here's what
Safety.
government does: they create or make worse crises, like, for example, this pandemic. They
Mhm.
make things worse.
So
They
that they can
use the
swoop in.
they can swoop in. They use the fear that's generated from that to say, we can fix this. We just need
Mhm.
more power and more money. It happened on 9/11. It happens after every shooting. It happens
Uh-huh.
after every, outbreak of a disease. It happens after every disaster. Anytime they can leverage your fear or
Mhm.
your compassion for others who are experiencing harm, they swoop in. Then they fail, because government is a uniquely bad way to do everything.
Right.
And then when they fail, they use that as an excuse that they need even more power and more money and more control. And it's like I said, it's a giant con game.
Well, their intention is not to fix the problem. It is to fail so that
Right.
that failure can lead to more power and more voting and more, well, they screwed up, I'll fix it. And
Exactly.
it's just a juggling act of, and meanwhile, we're all sitting here going, all right, guys, what you're doing is not working. Murphy, not I almost said Murphy's Law, but what's the definition of insanity?
Oh,
It's voting for the
keep
same
doing the same
two-party
thing.
system and expecting a different result. And at the end of the day, everyone just won't get away from, well, libertarians just won't win. Well, they would if you voted for them.
Right.
It's a very simple concept. If you don't like either one of those candidates and everyone voted for the
Right.
libertarian has a better chance of winning. So to
It
say that
goes up
30
quite a bit. The
politicians,
more people
yeah,
actually vote for it, the like more likely it is to go up. There's a very interesting thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, you're fine. You're fine. I'm listening.
So a very interesting thing that I noticed on the campaign trail, the three biggest objections that I came across, because we didn't just try to get the party faithful to come out to our events. It was we tried to advertise as much as possible to just normies that were in the neighborhood. We
Mhm.
picked parks in the middle of neighborhoods, and we set up the acoustics of the speakers and so forth to echo throughout the neighborhood, so people would be interested in what this big blue bus with a woman's
Right.
face and president on it, what that was all about. And when they would come out and they'd hear this message for the first time, the objections that I often heard, not from everyone, but from some, was, you guys sound like you're the best option, and here were the three main objections.
Mm.
You can't win. And then the other one, and like you said, it's easy for us to say, well, we could if you voted for it, but that's their thing.
Are
You
we
can't win,
winning
and
now?
I don't. Yeah, well, exactly. And I would say, well, if you want to continue throwing your vote away and wasting your vote on the people that created the mess that we're in, then you certainly are free to do that. And then the other objection that I heard was, your ideas sound good, but will they really work? And then the third objection I heard is, if I've ever heard of you, they'd either say, I've never heard of you before, or they'd say, I only hear from you for a few months every 4 years. That's why I'm focused on building a culture of winning and winning more races at the local level. We have hundreds of elected libertarians. And if we focus more resources where we are able to win much more easily right now, where we have a chance of actually winning, we could get 1,000+ libertarians elected in just the next couple of years. And that kills all three of those narratives. You can't win. Yeah, we do. We win thousands of times across the country. Your ideas sound great, but how will they work? Here's how they're working in cities and municipalities across the country. I never hear from you, or I only rarely hear from you. No, you're hearing from us every day in your cities and your state legislatures and your county councils and so forth. This is how we can combat those narratives that people have. But in the meantime, we're going to have to deal with the fact that a lot of people hold their nose and vote for the people who created the mess that we are in right now, in the vain hope that this time they'll fix it. And of course, we know that's never going to happen.
Sure. What is your advice, especially for you said, libertarians who are running? I'm thinking about running. The problem is family law has made me broke. I'm coming to you live from Dad's House Studios.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
is my dad's room, and I live here, and I've been here almost 2 years, and my kids come see me here on the weekends. And while I'm here, I'm, working, 50, 60 hours a week, sending half my income to her.
Yep. Yep.
And that's the situation. What do you say to someone like me who is very passionate, hardworking, will start a podcast, spend his last $50 a month to run, StreamYard, and spend his time doing this, and reach out to people who are doing things like you're doing, and experts and all that. And I want to run for office. How do I do that and win in the General Assembly in my state, North Carolina? How do I run for the House without any money, without any being in a
Right.
situation where I, sort of have the boot on my neck?
So I think, first of all, you need to identify what winning means to you in your race. And the two main victories are winning the actual election and getting into office and affecting change there. And the second one, and this is typically for people that are running for like president, vice president, governor, Senate. We're not there yet. We don't have the resources or the ability to win those kinds of races yet. We can get there pretty quickly, but we're not there yet. Right. And even some people that run for like state legislative races and stuff, they go in with the express intent of using it as a bullhorn for either a specific pet issue for that means a lot to them, or just to spread the libertarian message at large. What I would say is, if your goal is to win the election, pick an election where you have the wherewithal and the means to be able to win it. And you need to look at things like, for example, whether you're running for a state legislative race or whether you're running for a city or county-wide race, how many households, how many voters are in your constituency? How many people can you get to join your campaign team to help with things like door knocking, hyper local stuff like sign waving, the kind of stuff that actually wins election? Podcasts are a great way to get the message out there. Anything on the internet and social media is a great way to make connections and to get your message out there to the general public. If you're wanting to win a local or regional race, you have to do the hyper local stuff. You have to be able to do the door knocking. You have to be able to do the going to 4-H club or Optimist club, going to city community council events and going to city council and pushing forward for different initiatives or referendums or legislative changes that you want to push for, and making connections with the city council, within the city council, and with other people that come to those things, making connections with liberty adjacent or liberty minded groups like marijuana decriminalization groups, or police brutality, police accountability groups, or gun rights groups, anti-lockdown groups, any group that they may not be 100% libertarian, but they certainly are fellow travelers on specific issues and subjects. This is the kind of hard work you have to do if you want to truly win the election. Now, when you're working 50, 60 hours a week and when your funds are limited, that's a really tough one to do. And so it comes down to one of three choices: either taking every waking moment that you aren't working to do these things so that you can truly win this race, and picking a race where you're able to do that, where you can say, yes, this number of households, we can knock on at least half those doors, and we can do sign wavings in at least half of the major intersections during the time frame of our campaign, or saying, you know what, on my spare time, I'm going to pick a race, whether it's local or a state legislative or whatever, where I'm just going to use it as a bullhorn. I'm going to use it as a chance to get my message out as much as possible, with the understanding that my likelihood of winning is lower. Now, understand that you're going to have some limitations on who's going to be willing to help with the resources for your campaign if they know that going in, this is more about spreading the message than actually winning the race. And then the third option is doing something else, either continuing to double down on your podcasting and your efforts on social media and all of that, and even your local efforts in the community, or finding another campaign that is running for something in your area, or maybe not even in your area, running for something that you can give help with either in person or remotely. In which case you could maybe reach out to them and say, hey, I'm willing to help you on this, but I want to know that, one of your issues is going to be, for example, for you, family law or whatever it is that moves you. I'm talking to people at home as well that may have another issue that's the number one thing for them. And so it's really a lot of choices that have to be made. I don't feel comfortable telling you, Chris, you need to do this, because you have to decide, especially with the circumstances, the unfortunate circumstances that you're in, what you're most comfortable with doing. But based on what you're willing to put in, just the sheer energy that you have left after having to, work more than full time right now, you have to decide what you're comfortable with moving forward, what you're going to be comfortable with committing to until, a year and a half from now. And that's really up to you. And I think whatever you do, pick something that you feel like you can comfortably do without getting overwhelmed, so that you can put your 100% all into it. I would rather you put 100% all, and I'm not discouraging you for running, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're ready to put 100% all into running, I support you 100%. What I'm saying is, if you have any doubt that you'd be able to put 100% into your own run, I would rather you put that into someone else's run, put 100% of what you can put into that, then go in and do a run and fall short because you weren't in a position to be able to do that, and now you're regretting that you made that choice or whatever. So whatever choice you make, just make sure you're ready to be able to go in full throttle 100%, and wherever you go, you're going to have pushed not just your issue, but just the message of liberty that much harder than you would have in the meantime.
That's perfect advice. I'm definitely going to have to make that decision soon, because 2022 for the General Assembly here in North Carolina is coming soon. Since you mentioned the campaign and the scene where you guys were touring around and pulling up in the bus and pulling up in these places where a handful of people, locals or anything, knew that you were coming, and you had it on social media. That's how I knew where you'd be. And we drove about an hour. Me and my children came that day, and I really wanted to speak to you. I happened to come with a speaker, which helped out with a microphone.
Yes,
and a speaker.
You were Johnny on the spot with that speaker. Because
I was like, no one's going to hear y'all.
They anticipated that there would be, I think, 50 or 60 people there. And so based on that, they're like, oh, the acoustics should be okay. You can just yell. There ended up being like 200 and something people there. And I'm looking at the lay of the land. I'm like, guys, we're just on a field, like in a farm. I'm going to be screaming at the top of my lungs for people to hear it. And for you to have that speaker, that was so perfect, man. That was amazing. That was great.
It's when a musician's traveling around, you never know what he's going to have in the car.
I've loved you for it, man.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that video, and this is sort of an intimate one-on-one video. We had done an interview on victims of family law before I started this podcast, and we spoke. It was you, me, and Cass Jackson when we got really into the thick of it about policies and educated you a little bit, and you had great understanding and great responses. And it was pretty crystal clear to you what was happening once we told you what we were dealing with. And then I wanted to do that and introduce that. This is a live stream video, so the video quality is not as good as this is right now, but the audio is pretty good because you had a microphone. So
because I had a mic and a speaker, it
was very clear. So it's about 5 or 6 minutes, but this will segue into the conversation a little bit, because we talked about some of the policy changes and some of the problems in family law. And then when we're done with this, I really want to kind of throw some terminologies at you, and I really just want you to say yes or no. That is, sort of that's the definition of what's going on here. So we're going to bring up this live stream real quick and have a listen.
We also discussed absolute immunity with judges, and also the federal and state and welfare incentives that are in place that basically anyone who's ever been through a divorce or a custody battle have gone through and have had their kids taken from them without due process of law, while enduring ridiculous child support amounts to pay, while also paying tens of thousands, if not more, hundreds of thousands of dollars to attorneys to buy back your own children. I spoke with you in length in an interview, and you seemed to get it. And I spoke with Jo briefly, and she wanted to do some more research on what she could do federally in your place. What could you tell everybody? That's why I am a libertarian, because of family law. And these two little boys that are with me, because it's my weekend, while 2 years have gone by, and I'm bankrupt. And there's no reason I haven't been charged with a crime. It's just delaying it in court. And this has been going on for decades, 40, 50 years. And I just want to know, how can you and Jo help, and how can we sort of figure out what to do as we bleed that down into the states and get rid of all this incentivized money to take kids away from good parents?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that question. So you hit the nail on the head for why this is happening in the first place. It's happening for two reasons. Number one, because they can. And number two, because they've incentivized it. So we have a situation wherein the federal government matches funds for child support. If you are a state agency and you have one of two options in front of you, one is shared parenting with little or no child support, where you get much less money, and the other one is an arrangement where one parent has full or most majority custody, and there's much more child support, and you get much more money. Which one puts more money in your coffers? That second arrangement. And the reason they're able to do this is because they have created a system that allows them to do that. And so we have people who want to be in their children's lives, parents who want to be in their children's lives, who are unable to because the court determines, okay, we're going to give this parent the majority or total custody. This parent has to go and pay total child support. And as a result of that, that's what they get stuck with. This system isn't more known about because people aren't allowed to record their proceedings in court. Why? Because it's a total violation of your rights. You have every right to make it known what is happening in court. Courts are not, mad. There's no state secrets happening in there. There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to show everyone who would want to see it what is happening and record for yourselves what is happening in those courts instead of being reliant on their stenographer. There's no reason for that. We also have, and you mentioned it, we talk about qualified immunity. Judges and politicians have something called absolute immunity. They don't even have to pretend that what they did was reasonable. They just get immunity because they did it during the time that they were in office. And so we have judges who blatantly violate the rights of the people right out in the open and are not held accountable, cannot be held accountable because of absolute immunity. Let's be very clear here. Immunity for people needs to end, whether we are talking about corrupt cops, corrupt government officials, corrupt politicians, corrupt judges, corrupt crony businesses, whoever we are talking about. When someone harms you and when it can be demonstrated that they have violated your rights, aggressed upon you, and caused harm to you, they should be every bit as liable for that as anyone else who's standing here. Yes, sir. Very clear. There is also, and I think this is less. I think this is more of the cart pulling the horse than anything here. But there's something we have a presumption that in all cases that the mother should raise the child and the father should go off and pay for the child. And I mean, anyone who has seen what the average American household looks like right now, where both parents are both earning income and helping raise the child, I think that there needs to be, and this is probably something that needs to be handled more at the state level, and I think it would happen if we had a more equitable system that would come from the federal government no longer incentivizing the welfareization of our families. Yeah. The presumption of shared parenting. Yeah. All other things being equal. Now, if one of the parents has abuse issues or has, addiction issues or has a reason that there shouldn't be shared parenting, obviously it is within the latitude of the family courts to determine this. But the presumption should be that both parents are there because they actually want to be involved in their children's lives. Of course, that's why they're there. So here are the things that we think should be happening at the federal level. Ending the incentivization of this system by ending, Title IX?
Title 4D and Title 4E.
Yeah, Title 4D.
Of the Social Security Act.
Of the Social Security Act. The other thing that we need to be doing is ending immunity for anyone, including judges in family court. And the other thing that we should be doing is allowing Americans and protecting and affirming your right to record your proceedings so that you can show people what is happening to you. Because in the same way that an increasing number of Americans can no longer deny what is happening with police brutality, because we've all got cameras now and we can all show it as it's happening, and it's now people can no longer deny that it's happening because they're seeing it sometimes streamed in HD. When that is allowed to happen in courts, the American people who are not being subjected to the system will be able to see what's happening to their fellow Americans.
Yeah.
They've been told all along was happening and they didn't want to believe was true. They will not be able to deny it when it is right in their face. Thank you, Cole.
Yeah.
Chris.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
There it was. So
That guy's sharp. Whoever that
guy,
is very sharp.
he knew, I asked him that question and he knew what the hell he was talking about right away.
Yeah, he's a smart kid, whoever that is. I like his suit too. No, listen, this is a problem that this is textbook. What's going on with family law is textbook how government handles things. They create a perverse incentivization that leads to harmful and inequitable outcomes as a direct result as policy, right? So this is a perfect example of that. So now I feel like I have to one-up myself from the last time I spoke.
You
now.
do. That's just,
I'm competing with myself.
Like Mario, you got to eat the mushroom and grow a little bit right now.
Exactly. I gotta eat the flower and start shooting fireballs from my hand. The April 2021 spike has to beat October 2020 spike.
Exactly.
So you have a situation where the federal government is incentivizing in court. They are telling the court system, they're telling the state, and the court system is part of the state. They're telling the state that if you have shared parenting and there's little to no child support, you don't get much money for that. But if you have one parent have all or almost all of the parenting, and the other parent has to pay child support, the federal government gives money to the state, not to the parent,
right?
To the state.
And they're saying it's
just the state had to worry about it. Yeah,
they're saying it's just funding the programs, but we know that the people that work in the programs are being paid.
Exactly. So what's the point of that? If you have a system that says you only get paid if you put one of these people on a wage garnishment system and presume that they shouldn't be actively involved in their children's lives.
Right.
And then like I said in the thing, I think this is putting the cart before the horse. I think that presumptive shared parenting is going to happen at the local and state level once you get rid of the incentivization, because the natural conclusion of two parents in a court, absent any evidence of abuse or molestation or job, some reason why one parent should be an actual reason to believe that one of the parents isn't a good actor here. The presumption should be, we talk about presumed innocence, the presumption should be that both parents, to whatever degree they can, want to be involved in their children's lives. Right. And I'm not even against saying that if you have one that has a disproportionately higher income than the other, that there can't be some kind of sharing or something like that. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're talking about. Right. We're talking about a situation like yours where you can't afford your home. You can't afford to rent because you're paying so much money to be able to pay
subsidize her to raise my children for me.
To subsidize an income, and then you're having little to no access to your children. This is a problem.
4 nights a month.
4 nights a month. And I'm not going to pretend to know your entire case. And I'm not going to try to stick my neck out there and say, I think Chris is just from what I know.
Yeah,
there is enough for me to say, and from hearing from so many other people with similar situations like yours, men and women that have gone through similar situations like yours, that until we have getting the government out of incentivizing the welfareization of families, allowing you to be able to record your proceedings. And we see that not just in family court. We see people, we just recently saw Nicholas Wildstar was facing 6 years in prison for recording his own proceedings. Now, thankfully, he only got community service and probation for recording his own proceedings. That's a violation of his due process rights. And until we have where politicians and judges and anyone working for government, the judges, the prosecutors, the family court, the family court advocates, whomever else is working for government, until we have it where they're held just as liable for their actions as you and I are held for our actions if we do something wrong, until we have that, then we're not going to have presumed shared parenting, and we're not going to have a more equitable and fair family court system. We're not going to have that, because right now the weight is stacked towards put them on child support, 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 put them on child support. And that's not going to end until you deal with why they're doing it in the first place. And as I said from the beginning, this is about money. It's always about money. It's about robbing you of money and power and freedom. And we don't do that. We don't end that until we hold the people accountable and make it where people can see what's happening.
Is this so going back to I'm going to throw a couple terms at you, and I just want you to say, yes, it's that, or no, or give me your opinion somewhere in the middle.
Sure.
Is this legalized child trafficking?
That feels like a strong term for it, but it certainly is legalized separation of families. If nothing else, we talk about the families being separated at the border. That's an absolute travesty. We're separating families in our neighborhoods, in our homes.
Right.
So child trafficking, I guess in the strictest definition of the word, where children are being moved against the will of at least one of their parents, then yeah, sure. I don't want to compare it to coyotes funneling kids for sex work, but
Right.
but it certainly is a separation of families against the will of at least one of the parties involved. I've heard situations where both parents went into court wanting to have a shared thing, and the judge forced both sides into something where one parent didn't want to have sole custody and the other parent didn't want to have child support. And that ultimately is what happened. And neither side wanted it. So at the very least, it's separating families through the legal system.
Is it parental kidnapping when one parent makes false allegations to keep another parent away?
If you're making false allegations in a court system and using that, or with the police or whomever, and using that as a justification to to basically defraud the other parent of their rights, absolutely.
Do you think it's an extortion in any way? Is child support extortion? Is it unconstitutional?
I mean, government is extortion, whether it's constitutional or not. That's an argument that we can have for another day. I think the Constitution authorizes way more than we were told it was supposed to. I think that the anti-federalists have been thoroughly vindicated in their concern about replacing the Articles of Confederation with the Constitution. But that's a whole other subject.
Sure.
So unconstitutional, I don't know what to tell you. Is it extortion? Government is an act of extortion. Is child support extortion? I think when it is incentivized to take a parent who wants to be involved in their child's life and instead tell them, nah, you're going to see them maybe a few days a month. And in the meantime, you're going to have to be working full time and giving most of your money to pay for your child's upkeep. And you're also not allowed to be really that involved in their life. And that's certainly extortion, certainly one word that can be used to describe it. Absolutely.
Well,
because you have no real recourse other than to use the very system that put you in that situation. If you tried to, grab your children and get away from it, well, now you're kidnapping legally, right?
Kidnapping. So legally, I have a court order. Never have had a hearing. I'm a every other weekend dad. Never had my hearing. A temporary order was made permanent due to COVID and lack of funds for an attorney. I've paid. Just to shoot off numbers to you, I'm $20,000 in arrears because my income was fraudulently created in court without evidence and was going in the hole like immediately. Yeah. When they say you're making $5,000 and you're making $2,500, it doesn't take very long to eat up everything
you've got. And you don't have the money to be able to fight it. This is like with civil asset forfeiture.
Can't afford.
The government takes your money and you can't afford to defend yourself against them, which was the whole point of it. This is a similar thing.
So I'll put you on child support that leaves you almost homeless and broke. Right. And then how are you going to fight your custody battle?
Yeah. Yeah. And we see that a lot. And then if you're unable to pay it, then they throw you in prison, which, I mean, that's a great way to get someone to pay child support, is by putting them in prison where they can't make anything.
I went to jail. It's the first time I've ever been to jail was for child support. Yeah. And it was for failure to appear after paying the amount that the child support agency told me to pay. It was during COVID and I was receiving unemployment. I hadn't received it in 8 weeks. It finally took 8 weeks, 9 weeks for me to get my unemployment. And then I got a letter in the mail, and child support wanted $4,600, which at that time was 4 months of child support. I was paying $1,150 a month with no job, and gave them about 70% of what I had been given from unemployment. Paid it. Was told I didn't have to appear in court if I paid the money, and then the very next week, a sheriff picked me up for failure to appear, and they kept me a night in jail. Full get up. Ate the food, all that stuff. Guy tried to give me some moonshine in jail. They let me out the next morning, even after I showed them the receipt that I paid and the letter that said that I didn't have to appear. They were going to keep me there until Friday, and they put me on a $10,000 cash only bond. You can't bond out for child support. You can bond out for murder. You can't bond out if you owe child support.
You told me that when I was on the Victims of Family Law, and I didn't know that. You can't bond out for child support.
Because the bond is about contempt. It's wording. So if you're behind on child support,
it's a contempt order. It's not the order. Because otherwise it would be a civil matter. Yes. Wow.
So it's fancy language. And what they know is a lot of good people don't want to be in jail. Criminals don't care so much. We know bad people don't mind doing stints in jail.
They can still do their stuff in jail. Exactly. Yeah.
But good people like myself who were supposed to see their kids that following weekend want to get out of there. And what are they going to do? They're going to ask mommy and daddy and all their friends for
whatever
money.
it takes. Yeah.
Whatever it takes. And $10,000 more after I just spent everything I had to not go to court. And this is what's happening in America. What do we need to do? Whether it's Democrats, Republicans, I have met some really good Republicans and Democrats. We talk in terms as libertarians also, with Republicrats and them. We basically, I think we're talking about those who are higher up, maybe not your state and local, officials. I met a lot of really great Republican, General Assembly members and Democrats that I've talked about shared parenting. And there's some really good people that are Republicans and Democrats. But they're an allegiance to a party that, because they want to win an election or whatever, that they join,
Right.
and they do share
Right.
some of the policies. What do we need to do, Spike? What's happening? This has been allowed to happen. I feel like people have been, going back to the word, conditioned, brainwashed into thinking about false authority figures. The state works for us. I don't work for them. I pay their salaries. I pay the judge. I pay for all of that infrastructure in our taxes. The judges are supposed to be protecting me and my children. And it's been, like I said, well, that was 2 years, that video. So we're coming up on 3. And I see my kids every other weekend, and when she lets me, because I guess I'm a sufficient father when she wants me to be. And unfortunately, we're dealing with sick people, and we're dealing with the state's usage of those sick people to generate profits and revenues.
Right. Yeah.
What do we do? What should we do as the Libertarian Party? I think that's my biggest goal, not only to fight my own case and get shared parenting passed. If it's through Democrats and Republicans, that's fine. What do you think we need to do in the Libertarian Party? I think this is a libertarian issue that would transcend all party lines, that would bring people over to the Libertarian Party. We talked about that in our last interview. Why won't the Libertarian Party grab a hold of this like you have? I mean, obviously, you've given me the courtesy of more than one interview. You've been very obliging to any requests I've had, and I appreciate that, and thank you for that.
So I think, first of all, if you're talking about the national party, one of the main complaints that a lot of people have about the national party is that it's very hard for them to have a strong message about anything. And part of the reason we saw that with the lockdowns, and it's not because of any nefarious intent or malfeasance, it's because everything is done by committee and they don't have a communications division. So until they solve that institutional problem with the national party, we're going to continue to have a lackluster national response to anything, including family law or anything else. What I would say, and to answer this question, not long-term, no. I've been held for a matter of hours before, but I've never been held long-term. But I think there's 2 aspects to this when you talk about what do we do as libertarians. I agree with you. You don't need to wait for libertarians to get elected to push this issue. If you can get Republicans and Democrats to do any kind of reforms at any level, then certainly do it. In fact, I did an interview yesterday with a libertarian lobbying group that's lobbying exclusively Republicans and Democrats because they're the only people in the Kansas state legislature where that lobbying group is based. There are no libertarians to lobby to, but they're pushing for libertarian ideas. And I said, hey, listen, until we can get until the cavalry comes, right? Until we can get the good guys in there, you got to do what you can with what you have. When you say specifically with libertarians, what we need to do is there are millions of Americans that are being harmed and affected by this issue. And we need to make it clear that we stand with them on accountability for the court system, on allowing them to be able to record their proceedings, on getting rid of the incentivization of basically the welfareization of families and the tearing apart of families for no other reason than to fill the state's coffers, and getting rid of immunity for corrupt officials, really corrupt anyone. Like I said in that interview, I mean, October Spike was on it, that if you are being held immune from responsibility for harming others, that needs to end immediately. I don't care who you are. If you are being held immune for your malfeasant or negligent actions directly resulting in harm against others, then that needs to end, period. I don't care who you are, politician, judge, cop, crony business, I do not care. You need to be held just as liable as Spike Cohen and Chris Cole and everyone watching this are, unless you're a politician or a judge, in which case you should be held accountable too.
More liable.
Yeah, well,
you should be held at a higher standard.
If anything, to an even higher standard. I'll settle for the same standard. But yeah, no, if anything, you should be held to a higher standard. But we need to make it clear to those who are being acutely affected by this that we stand with them on this issue and on fixing it. Now, we also have to message to the normies out there. And in this case, the normies are the people who aren't being directly affected by family law and don't realize what the problem is. And we need to, when we're doing this, and I actually have talked about this on podcasts that aren't libertarian, I would delve into family law, and they would go, whoa, wait a second, you're against child support? What does that even mean? I said, well, first of all, I'm not against child support. Right. I'm against what has happened, and I talked them through it. We need to make it clear. Exactly. It's misused, and it's being weaponized, and it's being incentivized over actual intact family structures. You know, what is best? There isn't a single social scientist or child behavioralist that will tell you it is ideal for a child to be robbed of the access to a good parent. And that instead they should only have the one parent and have the other parent existing as a wage slave for the other household. There's no one that says that. Ideally, to have both parents involved as much as feasible and possible based on both their abilities and wherewithal is always the best for the child. So we need to make it clear this is about protecting families. This is not about protecting deadbeat parents or anything like that. This is about protecting children and about protecting the integrity of the courts and forcing people in power to be accountable for their actions, good or bad. And if we do that, and if we let the people know who I don't have to explain that to, the people that are being affected by this, and this isn't just the parents. You know, I'm sure your dad wouldn't need much convincing that this is a problem. There are many people who are, you know, on the periphery or just on the outside of this, the parents, the grandparents, other family members, other loved ones, the children who are now adults who went through this as children. There are many people in this who recognize that this is a problem, and we need to let them know that there's only one party that knows specifically what the problem is and is willing to actually do something about this. And it just so happens that it's 100% libertarian policy that we're talking about here. This is not pandering. It is accountability for officials. It is allowing you to be able to record your proceedings and have your due process rights to whatever extent you can possible. And it's about allowing equity in the court system and equal treatment in the court system. And it's about removing government incentives for inequitable outcomes. Right. We just need to make it clear that it's happening. And we also need to make sure that our messaging is tight so that we aren't making people think that we're in favor of, you know, rewarding bad parents or something like that.
How familiar are you with communism? And is this the destruction of the family unit one of the major, leadings into what has become the Communist Party?
So communism does not have a monopoly on government systems that want to destroy or at least greatly weaken the family structure in order to make it so that the state is prime. Fascism also does that. I would say if you had to pick a government system that we are under, and, you know, whether any of the major labels that are out there, socialism, fascism, communism, I think we're actually more in a quasi-fascist system than a communist one. But the, you know, I mean, you're often just a distinction of terms more so than outcomes. And the more that we lean into those authoritarian systems, the more you see the breakdown of the things that we build a community from: our families, our neighborhoods, our faith for many people. And you see the government actively attacking those structures because they're the only competition in the way of the government being your family, and the government being your faith, and the government being your belief system, and the government being your protector and your provider in your community, instead of that coming voluntarily and organically from your voluntary interactions with others, including within your family. So I think that that's just par for the course for authoritarians. Destroy anything that's in the way of them having total control over you.
Well, and what we're also doing is creating industries out of hurt people.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about, and we did last time, but I mean, I I know not only because I'm going through it, but the research that's been shared with me, and we're talking about fatherlessness on a global scale, not just in the United States, but all the things that we're seeing now with mass shootings, gender identity issues, mental health issues, behavioral issues, the drop in marriage, the rise in gang related violence, the amount of men incarcerated, the amount of men committing suicide. There is a dad deprivation going on, and it was systematically created primarily in the Black community. And then what's sort of happened is sort of making its way all over the place now. And the state figured out how to profit off this. So if you're not destroying a family or a set or some children through removing their father and having that kid on ADHD meds or anxiety meds or depression meds, or having to have them go see a therapist, all because, I mean, everything on this earth, and without getting into religion, we can just talk about the universe and nature, is centered around humanity and family. And when you attack that precious unit, that is what we are seeing as sort of the downfall, if you will, of societal norms, the breakdown of things, what people's belief systems are. Everything seems to be crumbling down. So why is this not considered? I would say that this is more of a major health crisis than COVID-19.
I would think long term, if you look at another thing you didn't bring up, was education outcomes and imprisonment. The rates of imprisonment are markedly and traceably and measurably higher among people who, as children, didn't have both parents in the household. Now, it's not to say, and whenever I say this, I make it clear, if you were raised by a single parent, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a hoodlum or anything like that. Sure. I'm saying, nor am I saying that if you were raised by two parents, that you are going to be a perfect person and that everything's going to be great. I'm not saying that. There's obviously overlap and nuance here, but statistically, there is a statistically significant difference in what happens when a child has both parents and when a child does not have both parents. And one would think that if there were any kind of inequity or unequal weighting in a family court system, it would be in favor of keeping a family intact at all expense. Now, I would say that also would end up being a bad idea, because it could lead to, families having to stay intact even if one of them's an abuser or something like that. I think the court should be deciding on an individual case-by-case level instead of trying to weight it one way or another. But, just looking at the meta data on this, one would think that if anything, they'd be weighting it towards keeping it intact, not towards ripping it apart, even if that's not the desire of everyone involved in both parents. In that case, I think that when you look at the fact that government is, yes, every time government creates these inequities, they also create cottage industries to feed these inequities. The war on drugs has created, private prison systems and the using the free prison labor contractors, and all the people that are outfitting these police departments, and the people making these surveillance equipment, and the people making the building all the vending for the prison system and everything else. There's entire multi-billion-dollar cottage industries built around it. Now, I will say I'm not quite as knowledgeable of some of the cottage industries that might be built specific to family law, but I can certainly guess some. For example, there's going to be a lot more need for intervention for mental health issues with children, because we know that children that are in a non-intact family are measurably more likely. And again, I'm not saying you're going to be crazy if you don't have both parents, but there is a measurable difference in outcomes for mental health. Well, that means there's going to have to be more therapy. That means there's going to have to be more prescription drugs. That means there's going to have to be more of everything related to that. And we know that people with mental health issues often have other health issues as a direct result of that. Having that mental anguish can lead to other issues as well. And now you're having to, have medical interventions and other interventions in order to deal with that as well. If someone is now performing poorly in school, that means there has to be more intervention there. If they end up in prison, then they're just feeding the prison industrial complex. So there's many different aspects to this. And this is what happens. And we said this from the beginning when we were talking about libertarians and what we believe when it comes to government and its relation with the people.
Mhm.
When you allow us to be conned by a system that robs you to feed cronies, which in this case, the cronies are the state government systems that are benefiting from this, and,
Right.
and the cottage industries built around it,
Mhm.
then you lead to a myriad, a nearly uncountable number of harms and abuses and inequities that come from it, because it wasn't something that anyone actually wanted, except
Right.
for the worst actors involved, the politicians and the cronies and the bureaucrats. That's what they wanted. They
Well, they
wanted it
can't-
this way. And for that matter, I'm sure the gangs want it this way too, because they know that, they're going to have much more, someone who is, coming from a bad family situation is far more likely to join a gang than one that isn't. So, I mean, everyone who's a bad actor benefits from this terrible arrangement.
Let's just talk about that. As far as gun rights, and then the new gun laws, and if you look at all the major mass shootings that have occurred, many of these boys were fatherless boys. Many of or gang related violence, any of this,
Right.
all this seems to be a lack of lack of fathers, whatever you want to call it, where these boys are having trouble outletting emotions, frustration, anger. They may be suffering from behavioral mental health issues. It's creating a culture, and I have absolutely nothing against women. Women work in this movement, and they see it. They see that fathers and men, because of the oppression of women, so to speak, in the patriarchy, and that's getting thrown, that is the excuse to turn it over and keep men down and destroy the family. And all that's doing is creating revenue, industry, business. The 1% stay the 1%, and the rest of us struggle.
And what's interesting is that it's based on a patriarchal mindset that it should always be the mother who is staying home with the children, and it should always be the father who is out providing for the children. When and I said that in the video that you showed. How many American households are still one income households with children? That's almost completely non-existent now, right? And yet there's this, absolutely patriarchal, certainly pastoral notion from, decades, centuries prior, that the mother is the one that stays home and provides for the children, while the father is the one that goes out and works every day, and that there's never any overlap there, and that there's no shared parenting or shared income earning or anything like that. So, I mean, this is the patriarchy in action. If we're gonna bring up the patriarchy, I don't feel comfortable, and I don't think you were saying this, but I just want to make it clear. I don't think that fatherless homes or non-intact families are the only factor in these issues. But it certainly, whether we're talking mass shootings, and I know that's not what you were saying either.
Yeah.
There's certainly an issue, or in many cases are an issue. And how many times was that the case? We talk about these mass shootings, but the reality is, the instances of someone going in and shooting up a mall and killing, dozens of people are far outnumbered by situations in which one person, and usually in some kind of gang violence or drug violence or some kind of criminal violence, kills like 5 people, most of whom aren't much older than their teens or 20s. And it's, you're losing entire generations, especially among Black and brown people in inner cities, that are dying as a result of this stuff. Now, we can blame the war on drugs on this. And we can blame the war on guns, but we can also blame the war on families. That certainly plays a role in this. And until we acknowledge that the government is basically engaged in a series of wars against every aspect of our lives and how we work and how we operate, and they do it in order to pad the pockets of the people who put them in office, the fact that this is even happening is bad enough. But often we think it's because of this ideological belief that they have, that their control over us will make things better. But it's not. It's for the most cynical of reasons. They don't believe their own nonsense. The reason they're doing it is to pad the pockets of the cronies that put them in office. That's why with these lockdowns, we see politicians that routinely flout their own lockdowns and mask mandates, we already knew that they thought they're above their own rules, but they're showing us that they don't even believe their own BS about these orders. If they thought those orders were protecting our lives, they'd do it themselves voluntarily to save their own lives and that of the people they care about. They know it's garbage. They know it's lies, but they do it anyway. And that's the case with family law as well. With every single thing they do, they know that they're lying to you.
Right.
They know that they're harming you for no other reason than to make the people who put them in office rich. That's the con game. And it doesn't end until we kick them out of office and replace them with people who aren't going to con us.
Boom. I love the passion at the end. Fantastic. Spike, we are approaching an hour, and I definitely will have you back one of these days. I appreciate the second discussion. I know you got a lot to do. I want to let you go. I got to work in the morning. Still got to work that 56 hours.
I know you got to get to work. Yeah.
But thank you for coming on. Why don't you tell them what you have coming up, where they can find you, and where you're going to be next?
Sure, absolutely. So my next event is I'm going to be in Wasilla, Alaska for an event that's also going to be live streamed called Gold Rush. And what Gold Rush is, we are talking with libertarians who want to either run for office. This may be something you want to check out. People who want to run for office or want to help someone else run for office, join their campaign team or whatever. And we're going to have a day-long event where different experts in different fields talk about the different aspects of what you need to do to successfully run a campaign and win as a libertarian. And it includes elected libertarians. It includes people that have been involved in successful campaigns and in very campaigns that have been able to accomplish all of their goals. And they want to share this information with you. So if you go to lpalaska.org, you can find more information out about Gold Rush. Most people are not, within a stone's throw of Wasilla, Alaska, but it will be online, and you can be a part of that. And it's possible that your state affiliate is involved in a sharing session with LP Alaska, where they'll actually have viewing parties across your state. So reach out to LP Alaska, find out if your state is participating in such a thing, or you can stream it from your own home. I think it's $25 for the whole day. And what I'll be talking about is how to build a culture of winning. What got us where we are, what we're doing wrong, and what we need to do to fix that and move forward and be able to actually win and accomplish the goals that we have. I'm going to be at events pretty much almost every weekend after that. This was one of the rare weekends that I'm at home. Pretty much every weekend after that, for most of the rest of the year, I'm going to be somewhere. So if you follow me on my social media, Spike Cohen on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, or on Instagram, coming soon will be spikecohen.com, which will have everything there. But if you follow me on my social media, I regularly update about my upcoming events. And if I'm anywhere near you, I invite you to come out. At every event I do, in addition to giving whatever speech I'm going to do or whatever presentation I'm going to do, I also do at least a half hour to an hour of Q&A, because I think it's very important to answer the questions of the people that come out and address what your concerns and your questions are. And I would be happy to answer any question that I have and to meet you in person. And the only thing I'll leave you with is this: all of our goals that we want to achieve, even if you're not a libertarian, all of our goals, building a better future for our families, making ends meet, being able to afford healthcare, being able to afford higher education, being able to afford housing, being able to get a good job, a better paying job, being able to be treated better by the people that are in positions of authority over us, being treated fairly. All of the things that we want to accomplish can happen when we get rid of the con artists who have a vested interest in making things worse. Right. As I said at the beginning, the con ends when we stop being conned. And so I invite you, if you haven't already, to come and join us. Join the Libertarian Party in winning back the freedoms that have been stolen from us and the power that has been stolen from us. And of course, the money that's been stolen from us. Because when we take it back, when we kick these clowns out of office and their bureaucrats and their cronies out of power, and we end their gravy train, and we put the power and the money and the freedom back in your hands where it always damn well belonged, then we will begin to fix these problems that we face. And we'll watch a lot of the problems that we were facing go away because they aren't in control anymore. And so I invite you to join us, because we will be able to accomplish all of these things together. And it starts today, and it starts with us. That's why I say that you are the power. And I appreciate you having me on, Chris.
Spike Cohen, everybody. Have a great night. This is We the Parents, episode 8. Check us out on YouTube and Facebook. Spike, we'll see you soon.
Thank you, man.